Hello and welcome to episode 38 of Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. And it's been a musical weekend, Mike.
It is. It's actually a musical long weekend. Tomorrow, Monday, let's say November 22nd, is the Feast of Saint Cecilia. That's the patron saint of music in the Catholic Church. She has had that position since the 15th century. And so I've been spending the weekend just listening to all these works that were written in her honor. And I'd like to recommend. I'm going to recommend three of them to listeners. There's a hymn for Saint Cecilia by Herbert Howells, British composer, a work that I really love. It's very short. It's 3 minutes long, really beautiful. Gorgeous poem by Ursula Vaughan Williams. That's the composer, Ralph Vaughan Williams' wife. And that's worth hearing. There's also, if you're into something longer, the two big works about St. Cecilia, one is by Henry Purcell, or Purcell, do we say these days, right? Mm. Hail, he did a few works to her, but the biggest one is Hail, Bright Cecilia. And that's a really charming work. It's about 50 minutes long. It's got one of the silliest texts ever set to music, so it's enjoyable that way. Purcell really did suffer from bad texts, I think, but he had great music on it, so these texts are now immortal because of him. And if you're interested in St. Cecilia's martyrdom, to know how it all happened, you can hear Arvo Pärt's very moving work. It's called Cecilia Vergine Romana. It's in Italian and really beautiful. Tells her story. It's pretty. The story is pretty off-putting. I mean, she was killed. She gets killed in it, you know. Mm-hmm. Then she's becomes a saint after that. So then those kind of stories aren't really terribly fashionable these days, but I still like them because I grew up in the Catholic Church, and people came to a bloody end in the early days, so they like to celebrate that, I think.
Yeah, and you rounded it out by coming to hear some sinful music last night at my gig. So
I did, I heard Russ. Was that sinful?
Wow.
You sang Down by the River, I Shot My Baby, I think. That's that's not such a good thing to do. I never did that. I just want to make that part of the record.
So musical weekend. That's good.
Musical weekend. It's going to continue into tomorrow, November 22nd, St. Cecilia's Day. Everybody, make sure you drink a toast to your favorite patron saint, because we all love music here.
Indeed we do. Yeah. And interestingly, looking at the listener stats, our listeners in France have jumped way up. Must be all those French Me Baby episodes we had.
You think they like that?
I don't know if they liked it or not.
French is a verb? Okay.
Yeah. Got their interest, though, anyway. We haven't got any hate mail yet, so.
Although, maybe it was the Eric Tanguy record. Maybe it was his pals that were listening, because we did that last week. Yeah, they wanted to hear what we were going to say about it. No one reached out to us, though, so I don't know what they thought of all that. We were trying to make out what it was about.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, it was a hard record. It kind of, I liked it, though. I mean, I'll certainly listen to it again a few more times.
Take a few listens on that one, I think, yeah.
Yeah, it was a little hard to talk about after only a week. You know?
Yeah.
That work like that's got to be absorbed over time.
Well,
all right, this week, it's just,
Before we get into this week's interesting combination of
this episode was really quite the amusement park ride, wasn't it?
That's right. It's a real fun house of music.
Yeah.
Before we get into that, though,
Funhouse would be Funhouse of Music might be a good title.
Could be a good title.
You should write that down.
Let's keep that in mind.
Yeah, keep that in mind too. We got to think of a title for the episode.
Yeah. Before we get into
this one,
the rides and
Chutes and Ladders
for the episode. Just want to remind the listeners that in our episode description, you'll find links to all the recordings we're going to talk about on Spotify and Apple Music, so you can check them out. And also at the top of the description, you can get all the music in one place. That's the full episode playlist on Deezer. And you can also follow us as a podcast on Deezer, along with the playlist. Our username there is Adult Music Podcast. And if you can't see the description or the links on whatever app or platform you're listening to us on, pop over to Podbean, our host, and all the links and everything is clearly laid out there. If you enjoy the podcast, Or if you don't enjoy it, you can let us know too. But do follow or subscribe on whatever app or platform you're listening to. And take a minute, give us a ranking, write a review. That'll help us get listed in the browsing category recommendations, and that helps us grow our audience. If you'd like to contact us directly, any comments, questions, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is adultmusicpodcast, all one word, @gmail.com.
Yeah. You can hate on us if you like. We'll just send love back.
Yeah. We'll just keep... We'll just go up to 9 recordings a week. You can listen longer. Yeah.
Philip Glass, by the way, once told this story about how some guy was like yelling up at him, like from the audience, like that he hated his music and all that stuff, and yet he was there. He had bought a ticket. And Philip Glass, kind of in his kind of Buddhist way, told the story about how he said, well, I didn't feel like I could talk back to him or say anything nasty because he had bought the ticket and this was his way of enjoying himself. So,
I guess, yeah.
Yeah. So he just let him be, I guess.
I suppose on YouTube or something, there's probably, like outrage watchers, people who watch things to get angry. But I don't think anyone would listen to 2 hours of a podcast just to be...
especially one without a video.
Yeah, where they can't see how handsome we are, really. So.
I know. Yeah, because then they'd all really hate on us because they'd say, "Oh, we just don't have a chance against these guys," of getting into a Hollywood movie. I mean, it's just impossible.
We don't want them to see your CD collection. They really have music envy. So.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, where do we begin the? We've got our tickets to the amusement park. Where do we get on today?
Well, our first and only normal recording this week. By normal, what I mean is it's straightforward. The other two, of the 3 classical recordings I've got this week, the other 2 are a little out there, and I didn't really expect that, although I really should have in the case of the second one, the Sol and Pat one, but we'll get to that when we get to it. The first one, I always start with Baroque. We like to go in sort of the order of composition or when this music was originally made. That's really why the jazz recordings come last, because they're all new. That's all new music. So we were going for the old, even though they're new recordings. All right, so the first recording is on the Signum Classics label, London-based Signum Classics label. It's called Behind Closed Doors, Giuseppe Antonio Brescianello, Volume 1, Opus 1, Libro Primo. Okay, and it has an overture suite on it too. Okay, so this is a Volume 1. Apparently, there are going to be 2 volumes of this project because Brescianello... he published only his Opus 1. That's the only thing he published in his life. He wrote other works that I guess he'd never published. And we're hearing half of that on this recording. There were 6 works in the Opus 1, and we hear 3 of them here. And there's also an overture suite that's a little longer. Okay. By the way, the album is called Behind Closed Doors, and that really doesn't have any Baroque reference at all. The ensemble, who is the ensemble here? Did I write this down? La Serenissima. Conducted by Adrian Chandler, who also plays the violin, solo violin parts. We heard from them earlier this year with the fantastic Settecento album of various Italian composers, which will be on my end-of-year list. I really liked that a lot and still listen to it quite often. This ensemble is British, and they have an Italian name, and they play Italian music, so they specialize in that. So it's kind of an interesting situation they're in there. But they named this album Behind Closed Doors because of the lockdown conditions they were in when they recorded it. And all their concerts were canceled, and the booklet note kind of goes into how distressing last year was. And I didn't really need to be... Maybe it'll be worthwhile reading 10, 20 years from now to remember, but I really need to have this explained to me, having gone through it myself. Although here in Japan, we weren't really treated terribly badly unless we left or came back. Yeah, if we were here, it was actually pretty okay. We didn't get locked down.
Yeah, the worst was we couldn't drink booze outside.
Yeah, for a while. That's not a big problem.
Not too bad.
Yeah. It was
Behind Closed Doors is a good adult music-like title, though.
I guess it is, right? Yeah. But they were all
that old
locked
Charlie
down. They're
Rich...
locked down. They're not getting. They're not as Count Basie would have it, making whoopee.
I guess depends on which door it is that's locked. If it's, the rubber room, it's not too good, right?
Yeah, or why the door is locked too. You don't want the kids coming in. Yeah, you don't want to give them an advanced education, do you? All right. Anyway, the composer here is all this unknown to me until now. Composer Giuseppe Antonio Brescianello, Baroque era composer.
That sounds like something on a menu, I'll have the Brescianello.
Yeah, well, a lot of Italian names do.
Too, yeah.
Yeah, Brescia, by the way, is a location. Actually, it's I think it's a city name. But he was born in Bologna long ago.
I'll have some of that too.
Yeah, Bologna. Yeah, I like that too. Yeah. I haven't had any of that for a long time, in fact. Okay, and he worked as a valet in Venice for Therese Kunigunda Sobieska, who was a music-loving, exiled electress of Bavaria. Bavaria being modern-day Germany, southern Germany, right? She returned to Bavaria after the War of the Spanish Succession with Brescianello in tow, and he later acquired the post of the director of music at the Württemberg court in Stuttgart in 1716, and then he became Oberkapellmeister in 1721. All right, and he lost his post between 1737 and 1744. The booklet doesn't explain why, but he remained nearby in Ludwigsburg until his death in 1758. So he died after Bach. Okay, that means the whole galant style was in full flow when he died, and the classical style hadn't really emerged yet, although it was with Haydn, but he was hidden away in the Esterhazy estate, and no one really knew about it yet until he got out of there. Okay, anyway, so we're hearing half of his Opus 1 here. The other half will be on a future CD. And this is well worth hearing. It reminded me a lot of Vivaldi, to be honest.
Yes.
I think he's heavily influenced by Vivaldi, who was older than him. Vivaldi's music was all published, the really popular ones like the Four Seasons were all published in the 17... between the years in the aughts, let's say, the 1700s and the 1710s. Yeah. And his music, Brescianello's, is published a bit later than that. It looks like, I guess the 1710s, 1720s. So he definitely had his ear on Vivaldi. Vivaldi came up with that new style, the fast, slow, fast concerto, and we're hearing that here. And
the violin parts sound really Vivaldi-esque,
So if you like Vivaldi, and you want to hear some melodies that really aren't Vivaldian, I guess, you can listen to this. The thing I'd say about this is Vivaldi's music is really bright, and it's really kind of, what's the say? It has a lot of spring to the rhythm, like it really just kind of bounces out of the instrument, sort of this sound. That is not the case with Brescianello, who seems a little more mellow, although that could just be the way that Chandler plays it. He is the soloist here. Okay, let's go through this really fast. Like they're pretty. I don't want to say generic because it makes it sound boring, but they're not boring. They're just kind of, there's no real surprises here as far as like what we expect. It's just really nice Baroque music, and very Vivaldian. The Concerto Number 1 for violin and strings and continuo in F major has this chirpy opening, and Vivaldi-esque melodies. I like the way the melodies are handed off to various instruments, like they kind of trade them between each other. Always an exciting sound when an ensemble can do that well, even though like professional ensembles, this is easy for them now, but it's still exciting. I really love it. There's an adagio, also Vivaldi-esque, and it has these sawing quarter notes like dun, 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 like you hear in the summer part of the beginning of the Four Seasons. Actually, maybe it's the winter part that I'm thinking of. Okay, the frozen part. And if it goes, it ends inconclusively, and then we have a third movement, allegro assai, catchy. Catchy is a good word for him. His third movements tend to be very dancey, like kind of country dances. Okay, now after that we get a sinfonia. So this program goes concerto, sinfonia, and they're going in the order of publication. So this is Symphonia 1 for strings and continuo in D major. These are on 2 tracks on the album, but they're actually 3 movement works. It's just that the adagio is attached. The middle adagio movement is attached to the allegro. on the first track. In this particular work, the adagio really isn't much of an adagio. It's kind of mid-speed, and then it goes into this watery Baroque dance theme, like kind of a rocking presto. Rocking in the sense of you're in a boat, and the boat is kind of lifting up and down on the waves, not like rock and roll. Okay. All right. Concerto Number Two. Again, we have this chugging opening theme. Again, something we've heard in Vivaldi too. It was pretty common in Italy at the time, apparently. So I got a little bit of an education here. The adagio, middle movement, is almost a Handelian or Purcellian, which is kind of interesting because they came much later. Actually, maybe they didn't. No, they were actually in the game by this time too. And Handel was in Italy as well. So Brescianello may have heard some of Handel's music. He was in Italy before he went to England, where he spent the rest of his life. And Purcell was, I think, always in England. There's a lilting accompaniment pattern supporting the violin melody, very pretty. And the allegro has good energy, and it's really beautifully judged. By the way, I should mention, this is a beautiful recording. It's just really upfront. Everything is audible. It's you can actually listen to this, like, say, if you're driving a car, too, because Baroque music doesn't really have any quiet, kind of parts that are just the road noise is gonna make it disappear. It's good driving music. It's also good for the morning. I always like this music in the early morning. Okay, then we get Symphonia Number Two, and that's the second one. We have Allegro Adagio, first and second movement attached. There's a very brief Adagio. That's probably why it gets the same track, and it has that same kind of dun sawing pattern that we heard earlier. There's a rocking kind of boat-like, boat on the lake kind of rhythm to the presto. All right, on to Concerto Three. Chandler's playing is really fleet in the opening adagio here, and he has a heavier, darker sound than most violinists who play this music. I'm thinking of people like Rachel Podger, who plays like the Vivaldi. When people play Vivaldi, they always have this really light touch. And I've heard Chandler play Vivaldi, and he has a light touch in that too. I feel like he's heavier here. I guess he hears the music as being heavier, and he just plays that way. Or it's the recording, or it's just me. I can't really tell.
I notice he has a very warm tone, but when he wants to, he gets that. I describe it as like a burr. It's like an edge to the tone, but it's inside of the the wider warm tone just when he wants it, and I found that really attractive to it. So most of the time it sounds just warm, and then when there's a certain phrase, he can sort of I don't know how he does it, not being a string player like that.
Well, it's probably it might be his natural sound.
This kind of edge that comes through without changing the overall tonal quality. And
but that said, this isn't aggressive playing.
No.
And he tends to play like sweetly, even in the Vivaldi, but I think Vivaldi's music is just by nature more aggressive. And I think Brescianello's is slightly mellower, although it's very similar sounding. It doesn't have the same kind of like urgent, like kind of attack to it. That's not to denigrate it in any way. This is a really beautiful, album. Sure to put a smile on your face. Okay, second movement, Adagio Cantabile, gently rocking, again, like it's got that watery kind of rhythm to it. And the third movement, Allegro, fast and comfortable, pleasing melodies, not aggressive, and I liked that. I especially like this melody, by the way. Chandler, by the way, there's virtuosity all over this music too, I should mention, and Chandler never makes it sound like it's a challenge. He just kind of tosses it off. He's always comfortable, musical, and very melodic, even with really fast figuration. He's a good player. The next Symphonia, number 3, for strings and continua in C major, has that chugging rhythm. He likes that rhythm a lot. Okay, this is the third time I'm hearing it on this recording. There's a really odd cello line in this particular work towards the end of the opening theme, and it cuts across the ensemble. I think it's a semitone up. And then we hear later semitones down. It's got this kind of moaning feeling, like it's an appoggiatura of some sort, but he really accents the note that isn't part of the chord, the minor second note, or it sounds like a minor second to me. I didn't really listen closely. We hear a lot of downward appoggiaturas in the violins, and the largo starts suddenly after 3 minutes, and it has a slow dancing quality. And then the allegro is like a dancey jig type melody, or jig. And that's it for Opus 1. We get an extra work, the Overture Suite in B flat. Okay, the overture is always a French overture, because that Louis the XIV started this. It's got, when he would enter the court, they would have to play this this rhythm for him, and it starts with like the slow overture, like dun 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 dun. Yeah, it's that rhythm, and then it turns into a fugue. This is really traditional. You'll hear this all over Baroque music, especially if the work is called French Overture. It's French because it came out of Louis XIV's court. Okay, this is a change of pace from all the previous works. Very smart programming here. We needed some variety. I mean, it would have been fine if this disc had ended after those 3 works, but the change really did kind of prick up my ears a bit, and I was kind of happy to hear it. The overture is brief, and then we get into a kind of a chicken coop fugue where you kind of have like a clucking chicken sound in the violins, like buck, 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 like that kind of thing. It flows very nicely and clearly. Yeah, there's actually a work by Handel that is referred to as the chicken coop fugue, because it starts like with this sort of rhythm, like this quarter note pattern that speeds up into 8th notes and then 16th notes, and it sounds like chickens. All right. After that, we have a bunch of Baroque dances. They're very brief. There's a gavotte, an aria, which is a song. It sounds like a dance, though. Because it's got like
very dancey on here.
Yeah, even though it's called aria, but aria would mean that the melody is accentuated. But this struck me as a dance. There's a bourrée, another aria. Again, sounds like a dance. Menuet and trio, a rondeau, which is pretty plaintive. I think that's a little unusual for a rondeau. And then it ends, as these works often do, with a gigue, which is very bouncing and thickly scored, I said here. So I thought this was a gorgeous listening and great recording quality. This is recorded close. There's some reverb on the strings, which is well executed. I mean, it sounds like they're in a fairly big empty room, and doesn't hurt the recording at all. It makes it breathe a little bit, I thought. Great listen for the morning, I thought. Yeah, let me see. The music is fairly straightforward, with occasional harmonic or rhythmic quirks to keep things interesting. It's not really a challenge to the mind, so if you're kind of looking to relax, this would be a great thing to listen to. It's just pleasant and positive and feels good. So there you go.
Yeah, I like this one a lot. The recording, just like their previous recording, the sound quality is top notch, and it's
Signum
kind of
Classics. Good work to your engineers there.
Yeah, it's got that pressurized sort of feel to it. If you listen to it in headphones, you'll feel the closeness and the sort of sonic pressure of the instruments, and you can hear the balance really well. And it may, in fact, remind you of Vivaldi's music, although it's a little bit different. But I think the cool thing is,
it's the same kind of general style, but
the cool thing about this recording is, everyone knows Vivaldi and most of Bach's works and things here, but here's a chance to hear something from that same period, and here it is, hundreds of years later, and there's still new things to listen to that haven't been so much recorded yet. So that was what was the charm of it for me, hearing some old new music that I hadn't heard before. It's pleasingly familiar, and at the same time it has a lot of fresh melodies and other ideas in the same style. So I'd definitely give this one a listen.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to the engineer, the recording engineer and producer on this record. His name is Simon Fox-Gall. Fox-Gall, G-A with an accent. L. Good work. Okay, I'm going to be looking for your name in these other Signum recordings. I bet he's on the Settecento record too. Got to look up those engineers. They really are very responsible for a lot of the ways these
that's for sure.
recordings come out. Okay, here we go. Now, this is the part where the log flume starts going down down the waterway. Okay, we've been on the cranking kind of ride up, to the top. And here we go. All right, my second choice is called Soul and Pat, and this is a duo recording by the violinist Patricia Patricia Kopatchinskaja, and she's what did I say she was? She's Moldovan, I think. I should have written this down.
I think that's it.
Yeah, and Sol Gabetta, who's Argentinian, she's a cellist. So this is violin and cello. All right, and I picked, now, this is already the third recording with Kopachinskaya on it. And I should mention, my favorite pianist in the world, or one of the two or three, is Stephen Huff, British pianist Stephen Huff. And he was on the very first episode we ever did. I talked about him. And this year, he, like Kopachinskaya, Patricia Kopachinskaya, released 2 other albums. And I haven't talked about either one of them. Why not? Why am I so focused on this woman's playing? I do like her playing, by the way, and I like her ideas. But I love Stephen Huff. And the reason I didn't program the other 2 is because he did Schumann Piano Works, and then he did a disc of Chopin Nocturnes, which are excellent. They're really fantastic. Highly recommended. Go hear them. But I didn't want to listen to like all the Chopin Nocturnes again, to kind of talk about. What are you going to say? Yeah. You can talk about his playing in each one of them, but I'm kind of, I don't know. I think it's too much of a good thing, really. But it's good to have. I really love his playing a lot. And the Schumann was great, too. It's another great recording. We will definitely be featuring Stephen Huff again on this podcast, but maybe, well, it depends. Maybe we will this year because if we run out of stuff. But even though they're excellent recordings. Okay, well, the thing about Patricia Kopachinskaya that I want to talk about here, I would have let this one go, but it had one of my favorite works of all time on it, the Ravel Duo for violin and cello. And it also has the Kodai Duo for violin and cello, which is also fantastic.
That's the one I liked best.
Yeah, they're often paired together. And the best recording to hear of both of those works, I'll recommend this to you, is by Kennedy and on the violin and Lynn Harrell on the cello. It was formerly an EMI recording. Now it's Warner Classics. I think they all merged into Warner Classics now. It's still available. You can certainly hear it on a streaming service, so give that a listen. Those are pretty definitive performances, and they're fantastic.
I do like Lynn Harrell's playing a lot. Yeah.
Say again?
I do like Lynn Harrell's playing a lot.
Yeah, that's a great album, by the way. It's one of my, it might be a Desert Island disc for me. They only let you take a handful of discs to the Desert Island, though, so I don't know about that. Maybe it wouldn't be. I like all these old rock recordings, too, so I have to bring some of those. All right, anyway. This is the kind of album that was made to elicit discussion. So you hear this, you're going to want to talk about it. All right. Nothing is predictable when Patricia Kopachinskaya is involved. All right, the first work on this album is a Baroque work by Jean-Marie Leclerc. So here we are, continuing in the Baroque tradition. This is his Tambourin in C major. Leclerc is a French composer from the Baroque era, mainly for the violin. He's well known for his violin works. Very different than Vivaldi's. They're kind of more suave, let's say, as opposed to showy, which would be Vivaldi, and Brescianello too. This is kind of like this whole program can be thought of as like a giant Dagwood sandwich, because the last work we're going to hear is also a Baroque, one movement Baroque work. So keep that in mind. You might want to, do that. It's excellent programming, really, is basically what I'm saying. I'm just saying it in a funny way. Okay. Now, you hear this work. It's a Baroque work, and you know what Baroque music sounds like, so you know what to expect, right? Well, guess again. They really do interpret. They go out of their way to really interpret this differently than anything you would expect. It's got an aggressive tambourine on it, and Patricia Kopachinskaya plays an aggressive violin line. Sol Gabetta comes in later with the same aggressive dance energy. This does not sound like a work would have sounded in the Baroque era. There's just no way. Okay, there's a lot of contemporary angst in this playing, I think. They sound like they want to make a statement here, and this piece certainly does that. We're not, this is a Baroque era work, and they take a lot of liberties with it in their playing, so we're prepared for what's going to come now. And they laugh at the end of this. On the track, you can actually hear them laughing when it's over. So they know they're being a little mischievous here. Okay, here we go. Next work is by Jurg Vidman. He's a contemporary composer born in 1973. And he wrote 24 duos for violin and cello. We get 2 of them here. We get number 24, Toccatina all'Inglese. And this one has a lot of upward scales in it, and they're all pretty aggressive, as we would expect from these 2, and especially from Kopachinskaya. There are lots of sawing and bowing effects. The attack on both instruments is hard and aggressive. And it's an intriguing piece, really. There are a lot of cat-like yowling sounds in it, like produced by, moving your fingers along the fretboard, although there are no frets on a violin or cello. I don't know what you would call that. The board, the fingering board. They sound like they're having fun, but the question is, are we? I'd say yes. I like this to an extent. I like the pizzicati toward the end of the piece, by the way.
Don't forget the interesting quotations in there.
Oh, what were they? I didn't write them down. I forgot.
There's
like the James Bond.
James Bond theme is quoted in there several times.
How did I should have written that down. So stupid. I thought I'd remember.
Yeah,
and that's what happens.
Yeah, there's bowing, plucking, and slaps. I don't know. Did you say that? It's like, Stanley Clark on the violin. It's like, it sounds to me like someone's like slapping it. I thought, I haven't heard that before in classical music. But
right.
Yeah.
All right. The next one is piece number 21, Valse Bavaroise. So I'm guessing southern Germany, Bavaria. This is a rather odd sounding waltz. And it has a lot of pauses in it. You're not going to dance to a waltz with a lot of pauses. It sounds like the waltzers have a limp in the rhythm that we're given. Once the proper waltz begins at around 45 seconds, it sounds very decadent, like this form is like dying, and it's kind of like, it kind of sounds like the ruins of an old building made into a sound. The musicianship in putting across the various sounds and rhythmic changes is pretty amazing. Both of these works, I'd say, were amusing. I liked them. Yeah, I don't know. They're not. They're trying to just kind of be fun. Next, one of our favorite composers here at Adult Music, Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach. That's the great Johann Sebastian's eldest surviving son. This is a presto from one of his piano sonatas. It's a multi-movement solo piano piece. I think it has 7 movements in total. This is the 6th movement. Here, it's arranged for violin and cello, and it's played completely pizzicato, which is completely different than it would sound on any keyboard instrument.
Yeah, I think they're going for making it like a harpsichord, right? And
maybe
that's what I got out of it. Like, because you can almost imagine the harpsichord pluckiness of it. Yeah,
they certainly played it as quietly as a harpsichord, because this is a very quiet track. Patricia Kopatchinskaja's pizzicati are barely audible at times. I found myself leaning in to hear it. Okay, next comes a piece by...
Here comes the
formidable...
the mirror at the amusement park that makes all funny shapes. Yeah.
Okay, Francisco Cole. Now, we have had issues on this podcast with this composer's music, namely in the second ever episode where we heard his... we heard 2 of his works, and one we thought was... We thought it kind of sounded a little too 20th century for our taste. And then the second one was La Lula Lead, and we just hated that. So we kind of didn't think much of this composer. And by the way, that was on another disc called Plaisir Illuminé, which Kopachinskaya was also on. Not only that, but she played his violin concerto this year too on another album that we haven't talked about. What's with these two? Why is he on every one of her albums? Are they dating or something? I want to know. Let's get some classical music tabloids out there. I want to know what's going on here. Anyway, this piece is called Rizoma, and in my notes I wrote, "This guy again," with an exclamation point. Okay. Anyway, this piece is pretty decent. I liked it. It didn't really sound terribly like modernist, like post-war or anything like that. It really sounded a little different. It's listenable. It consisted of long, drawn-out tones contrasting the 2 instruments, and it's pretty good. There's a build-up and the piece mellows out midway through and becomes plaintive and quiet. By about 4 minutes, 45 seconds, it's all crystalline harmonics, and I really loved that sound. So, Francisco Cole, you're back in my my good books. I kind of thought this was pretty nice. I thought this piece was eerily beautiful, or at least that sound was. And it was clever to make the decrescendo end in this crystalline harmonic sound. There was a big decrescendo, and it ended with this really ghostly sound. It was kind of cool and beautifully executed here. So great musicianship there. The music then abruptly goes into an energetically rhythmic section with meaty bowing on both instruments. And there are a few crescendos on glissandi that I found appealing, especially by Kopachinskaya. So here you go. This is a likable or an interesting Francisco Cole piece. He's a contemporary Spanish composer. You want to say anything about that or no?
Sometimes it sounded serene and calm. But there's some of those pitch changes were kind of disconcerting, like
right.
I think
he wants that, though.
One way, it was a little bit, and then I was surprised with the change to the ending section. It's kind of interesting. Yeah,
the ending section. I kind of wanted it to go off into the ether after the crystalline section, but then he had the loud ending. So I guess if you're falling asleep and you're all happy in your chair, he's just gonna make you jump up at the end. Yeah. All right, next track 6 to 9, we get to the Ravel piece by Maurice Ravel, Sonata in A minor for violin and cello. I love this work so much. It's just it's you can't really say beautiful, but it's fascinating to me the way he kind of the themes. I wouldn't call them beautiful or gorgeous, although there is a really beautiful theme in the third movement. But it's just intriguing to me. I just love the way he kind of winds the melodies around each other. Especially with the opening is really intriguing too, because you hear this pattern, this ostinato pattern on the violin, and then the cello comes in its really high range, and it's playing higher than the violin. And I just think that's just a really cool approach. It's not what you would expect, because you expect the cello to be the low instrument, right? And it's just a really clever intro. Confuses you a little bit. Of course, if you're watching it, you know what's happening, but on a recording, it kind of throws you for a loop. Anyway. Here, now I mentioned that Kennedy and Lynn Harrell did for me, what is the definitive performance of this work. Here, they're not competing with anybody, as you might expect. This is phrased and presented a little differently than any other recording I've heard. There are mutes at the beginning. I think on the violin, maybe on both instruments, it's very quiet. It's a bit faster and quieter than usual, and the melodies are given sort of a different shape than we usually hear. Like we usually will just hear the violin playing the ostinato pattern, but here it's being given like a slight crescendo and decrescendo to just kind of draw it out a bit. The whole thing feels different, but it's still appealing. There's slowings of the tempo. They make this movement expressive in a way that we don't think of it as being, if you're really familiar with it. A lot of it is, the movement is ghostly due to the muted sound, and that's unusual too. Anyway, I was intrigued by this. I liked it. It's definitely not going to be my preferred recording of it, but I was really interested in what they were doing. Okay, second movement, très vif. This is a pizzicato movement. Très vif means very fast. These two musicians are very impressive in shaping melodies while using a pizzicato technique, because usually you just kind of hear people plucking on the strings, really. This comes across as really musical in their hands. Usually it kind of comes across as sort of aggressive and sort of, brutally modernist. And not here, though. They get suitably harsh sounds on the accents, and the harshness is a bit comical in their hands, too, and I thought that was a little unusual. It kind of sounds, it's got like almost this barking quality to it, like a dog. The movement sounds more sinister than it ever has before for me in this performance. It's perfectly realized. The ending of the section is perfectly realized as it slows and fades, and the harmonics after the 2 minute and 30-second mark are gorgeous. All right, the very beautiful third movement, Lente. This has a gorgeous theme at the beginning. It's first presented by the cello. This movement is played pretty straightforwardly here, but with all melodic material meticulously handled as far as interplay and dynamics. This feels like a very, highly prepared performance, as all professional performances are, but this really sounds like a lot of attention went into every little thing. Soul's more than usual is what I'm trying to say here. Soul's phrasing, Soul Gabetta, that means phrasing and highlights odd notes, and that draws the ear in. Again, this movement gets preternaturally quiet toward the end when we hear the opening textures again. It's very nice, but this doesn't come across as touchingly as it does in other performances, because it sounds more intellectual to me. And it's probably because of the hyper preparation that the musicians obviously did on it. I think they kind of took the feeling away. They kind of wanted to present it, I think, as a more intellectual movement. Clearly their aim was the effect that they achieved here. But I want to encourage you to hear the Kennedy, and actually it's better to hear that recording first and then hear this one to compare them, to kind of see what they did. It's really interesting. The fourth movement, Vif, avec entrain. Again, this is a very alternative approach and more appealing than usual to shaping the melody and handling dynamics and accents. I really liked this. This is a pretty fast movement. The quotes of the opening melody from movement 1 are highlighted and easy to spot here. They usually just kind of go by without me really registering them as strongly as I did here. The form of the movement is easy to follow in this performance too. It's A-B, sort of like a Bach suite movement, where you get like this one section and then there's another section and the first section doesn't repeat. Think about the Goldberg Variations theme, for example. Though this is much more aggressive material. There's nothing Baroque about it. I love this performance. I thought it was pretty intriguing, and I much prefer Kennedy and Harold, but I thought this was great. I really liked it a lot.
Yeah, I thought it kind of keeps with the overall more playfulness of this
this whole album.
Yeah, I've heard this in different performances before, and it's got I don't know. I mean, it does have a lot of variety, and they do draw out the sort of more placid and beautiful places as well. But overall, it's kind of, I don't want to say lighthearted, but not too serious, but sort of I think they just enjoy playing with each other a lot.
Yeah, you can hear that really clearly.
I think that sort of playfulness in their sort of communication with each other has a big influence on how they go through all the material on this album. So they're having a good time with it rather than being overly serious about the music, I think.
Right. You can sort of get a sense of what the tone of the album is going to be by looking at the album cover. On the right, you can see Patricia Kopachinskaja with her index finger on her cheek, and she's kind of looking up in this kind of mischievous way, I guess you could say. And that's pretty much what the album sounds like. So I guess the cover does match the playing. Okay, track 10. This is a very long album, I should also mention. It's 80 minutes, so the full length of a CD. The 10th track is by another contemporary composer, Marcin Markovits. How cool is this? We have so many contemporary composers on this record, too. It's always good to hear them. This piece is called Interlude, and it opens with these haunting harmonics. And I love string harmonics, so I instantly liked this and took to the odd sound this makes. The work grows into a dancey rhythm, and it ends with the crystalline glass harmonic. If you've ever heard the glass harmonica, which is the sound you get when you kind of wet the rim of a glass and move your finger on it, it kind of has that sort of sound to it, but although you don't hear a glass harmonica, you hear them on their string instruments making this effect. It's very brief at 1 minute and 39 seconds. I thought it was super cool. I liked it a lot.
I would say don't play this one if your pets are in the house.
That's probably true.
And you make sure your volume is down if you want to save your tweeters. I described that glass harmonic thing almost as like a machine noise kind of effect. It's interesting, but I'm glad it's brief.
Some people do hear that as like a fingernails on the chalkboard kind of sound.
Yeah,
I like it. I don't like the fingernails on the chalkboard sound.
Must be my canine qualities that sort of made me glad this was a short piece.
Those canine qualities. Oh, boy. All right. Julien Francois Binden is the next composer. Now, he, rather interestingly, died this year at the age of 104. He was born in 1917. Yeah, he just died like earlier this year. So this is called La Fête au Village, Opus 9. And this is sort of a suite. And it sort of tells a story of this whole entire day in this small French village where this sort of feast day is being held, this village festival. And the first, it's in 6 movements. They're all very short. It opens dimanche matin, and it starts the wavering figure, which I guess is the haze of the opening of the day. Sort of reminds me of Bartók's Night Music a little bit. There are a lot of open fifths in the bass to give a pastoral sound, like a musette, which is kind of a lighter bagpipe kind of instrument. Then the day breaks. You'll notice it by the sudden rise in dynamic, and rocking figures sound like they represent bells pealing. They're just these kind of like back and forth sort of strokes on the 2 instruments. I think it's supposed to be a bell sound. My guess. Second movement, fanfare, starts with shouts from the musicians. This is contemporary work or 20th century work when you hear that. And I think this was composed in around 1940 or so, around that era. Fanfare begins as a kind of circus dance. There's a frowny violin melody played over a chugging bass line in the cello. It sounds like yowling cats. We've already heard the yowling cats sound earlier.
This sounds, when I heard this, it reminded me, the place closed down now, probably because of this, but there was a little restaurant, and they had a record player in there.
Right.
But it wasn't the record, it was something wrong with the turntable.
Right.
It was like out of alignment, and so every record they put on it had this horrible shift in pitch bend, and that's what this piece is. It's written that way. So listen to the violin here. It has the effect of a warped record,
right?
Sort of like it's pretty interesting. I wonder how that's written in the score, like a la bad turntable or something.
I bet there are arrows like pointing down towards where they're supposed to end these glissandi and stuff.
Could be, yeah.
I don't know. All right, the third movement is a discours du syndic, which is a syndic is he represents the bank. He's like a crediting union or something like that. And Patricia Kopatchinskaja states the title before the music begins here. They say the names of the movements like before they begin. You hear their voices. And I'm pretty sure it's Kopachinskaya talking. Judging by the movement, the syndic in question is probably a blowhard because he sounds really annoying. The violin line anyway. Fourth movement, Filles et Garçons, boys and girls. The title is stated, and then the 2 musicians start playing. This is a lively work and has a slow dancing middle section. Fifth movement, Pont de Danse, dancing bridge. The title is stated at the beginning, and this has a country dance rhythm. And the rhythm sounds a bit off, and the melody at the end of phrases is off as well. It's a tricky rhythm for the dancers in the brief middle section. Assuming, we're imagining that this is maybe it's like a local village band who can't play very well, and the composer has articulated that in his score, and they're playing it like that. She's exceptionally good at expression, Patricia Kopachinskaja. I'm giving her all the credit, but still Gabetta deserves all the credit here too. She's pretty great as well. And the last movement is called Soir. That they announced the title, and which it means evening. Okay, this starts as a simple contrapuntal material. It's all slow with nice harmonics in the violas, the violin, I guess, indicating the end of the day, and that's how the piece ends. It's charming. Charming isn't the right word. Amusing, I guess, would be the word.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the next composer is a name that strikes fear in my heart when I see it. Yannis Xenakis. He's a Greek composer, and he was very much into the dodecaphonic 12-tone. Well, no, actually, no, he wasn't. I'm sorry, I take that back. He was very unique, actually. He worked out his forms and musical intervals through rigorous mathematics. I think he might have been a mathematician as well. And it wound up sounding pretty harsh, basically. But this work isn't one of those works. It's more of a... It's really unusual for him. It's called, it's in Greek, diplizia. And a zia is a Greek couple dance, and dipli means doubled, so a double time Greek couple dance. And that's what it sounds like. I was dreading this when I saw his name, because he forms this music after mathematical formulas, as I said. But this is just a dance, and it's got a bounce to it and a very meaty, hearty rhythm. It's in 3 sections, and they're all easily discernible. You can tell where one ends and the next begins. The ending is an aggressive, exciting dance, so a good piece. I didn't actually realize that he had written music like this.
Yeah, this was
next.
fun.
What was that?
It was pretty fun. I like the modulations and the sections and lots of the changing things,
right?
And, driving rhythms. Yeah,
I just don't want. I don't want listeners to go away and say, "Oh, Yanis Xenakis sounds great. I think I'll listen to more of his music." And then you're going to get hit with all those really dense, mathematically formulated works. Although you should go and check it out just so you know what it sounds like. Okay, it's not that it's bad. It's just I'm gonna get hate mail from all these like modernist types now that are gonna be like, oh, you don't understand music, Anyway,
yeah.
The next one of my favorite composers of the 20th century, Jurg Ligeti. I really love his music. This is called Hommage à Hilding Rosenberg, and this is very short. It's 1.5 minutes. The usual inventive harmony from this composer is in this work, and it comes across as a sad lament. It's a bit frowny in its melodic shape. A lot of frowns on this album, but like comic frowns, somebody in clown makeup frowning, exaggerated frowns that can't be real, that kind of thing. All right, next we get to the other centerpiece of this recording. 2 centerpieces, how can that be? Well, the canon and ellipse. So here we go. So think of this program as a big ellipse. This is the second, the Zoltán Kodály duo for violin and cello in D minor, Opus 7. This is a fantastic piece that everybody should be familiar with. It starts allegro serioso, non troppo. There's an exciting, emphatic opening in this too. Very hearty, weighty melody. The violin starts with a folk-like Hungarian melody. We're going to hear a lot of those. The second theme is quiet. And the material keeps changing. Last week I had mentioned in Eric Tanguy's music that it kind of sounded like panels, like the material just goes on. I feel like that's kind of the shape of this. It just kind of moves from episode to episode. That's how I picked it up. I've never actually studied this work, so I don't really know. They played this work pretty straight. I think this is kind of a little closer to, I don't really know, the East European background of Patricia Kopatchinskaja, so I think she knows a lot about what's in this, even though it's not her nationality. There's a lot built into the movement to keep the attention anyway, and it's a very long movement, 9 minutes long. The next movement, Adagio, is also very long. This is played softer than it usually is, although it's a pretty quiet movement in general. Well, it starts out that way. There's a crescendo, then quick crescendo. The violin very quietly plays its line. Again, the harmonic, what I want to say, dynamics are exaggerated. It goes on from section to section, as the first movement did. At least that's the way I heard it. This piece's dynamics and techniques seems like it was written with these two in mind. I thought they played this extremely well. The third movement, Maestoso largamente, ma non troppo lento. This is a short movement. The violin starts with dramatic melody, and it trails off, gives way to a double-stop cello pizzicati. It's really exciting, like changing textures all the time. It's really amazing the inventiveness that Kodály brings to this composing for just 2 instruments, 2 string instruments. The violin plays some figurations, and it seems like the violin is having all the say. The cello is responding quietly to everything the violin plays. The contrast seems to be between the 2 instruments in this movement, like their volumes. It's as though the violin is trying to drag the cello to a louder dynamic, while the cello is encouraging the violin to quiet down. The cello has its way at the end. And the fourth movement, Presto. Fast repeated notes set the rhythm, so this is like a fast, I guess, Hungarian dance type of rhythm. The middle section has the middle of the movement, I shouldn't say the middle section. The middle of the movement has a cool folk melody, played very quietly. There are a lot of exaggerated dynamics throughout the work, and there are a lot of quicksilver mood changes, especially in this movement, and really in the whole work in general. This work, to me, was sort of a microcosm of this entire album. It's almost like this was the model that they, with all these quick changes and these sudden, oddities of the, these sudden unexpected changes. I feel like the entire program of this album was modeled after this work. Anyway, we get to the end piece of bread on our sandwich here. Johann Sebastian Bach, Prelude number 15 in G major. This is a keyboard prelude. Here it's arranged for violin and cello pizzicati, and this is very quiet and charming. Kopachinskaja's shaping of the melody over the pizzicati throws it into sharp relief. It's a tranquil ending to an adventurous album. I think our two mischievous players here are tiring out and getting ready for bed at this point of the album. The ending kind of echoes the ending and shape of the Zbinden piece, the Soir movement, where it's the end of the day and it just feels a little weary. They play it that way here. This album has a lot of mirrors on it, I would say. I'm gonna recommend. It's good. It's not an easy. It's an enjoyable listen. It's kind of a jokey album. And it's not something that's going to stay in the background if that's what you're looking for. You might want to skip this. It demands that you listen, and I think it's kind of a fun record to hear.
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't listen to it again for the compositions other than the Kodai.
Yeah.
That work has a lot of interesting, unique things, and I want to hear that again. The other,
try to hear the Kennedy and Lynn Harrell recording.
Yeah,
it's really good.
I'd like to hear that. Yeah, everything else was playful and fun, an interesting program, but the Kodai is definitely the piece compositionally that caught my interest the most, and had a lot of interesting harmonic things and changes within each movement. So I'm going to go and listen to that one at least once more.
Yeah, by the way, for listeners, Kodai, Zoltán Kodai, was Béla Bartók's pal, his countryman, and his co-conspirator in the collecting of Hungarian folk music, which was the big project that the both of them worked on in the early 20th century.
He had a whole educational system for music too, didn't he?
Yeah, the both of them did, but yeah, he wound up kind of actually working in the schools and really teaching it. It's pretty amazing, and they're still using it today, I think, in Hungary, and they certainly turn out some pretty amazing musicians there, so they're doing it right. Okay, our last classical album is a contemporary composer, Sophia Gubaidulina. She was born in 1931, and so she's 90 years old this year. She's still alive. These works are all pretty recent, so she's still actively composing. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about Sophia Gubaidulina. When she was younger, she lived in the Soviet Union. She was, let me see, I'm sure I wrote this down, where she was born. In Tardistan in 1931. She now lives in Hamburg in Germany, which is also where Arvo Pärt lives, I think. Okay. She met Shostakovich when she was a student, and Shostakovich heard her music and rather famously told her, now this is during you got to remember, this is during Soviet times when there were kind of, there was a sort of expected type of music you were supposed to, there was an expected effect you were supposed to have. Anyway, Shostakovich heard Gubaidulina's student work and said to her, you must continue on your mistaken path, which is a really great quote. And continue on it she did. Now, Gubaidulina is her head is in a very spiritual place. Now, we don't want to mistake this for her sounding like Arvo Pärt. She doesn't sound anything like him. In fact, her music is a bit intellectual and challenging. Okay, and we'll get to that when we talk about this a little bit more, these three works a little bit more. Okay, this is on the Deutsche Grammophon label. I should have mentioned that the Sol and Pat was on the Alpha label. Okay, this work, is on the Deutsche Grammophon label, and the artists are the Gewandhausorchester Leipzig, conducted by Andris Nelsons, and I found that to be really attractive as well, because Nelsons in recent years has put out, I believe there are 4 now, albums of Shostakovich symphonies with the Boston Symphony Orchestra, and they are fantastic. You should dig those up. So when I saw him conducting Gubaidulina's music, who I really like, and I'm just captivated by her music. It's not easy. It's not hard to listen to. It's not really off-putting or anything, but it's dense and it's kind of intellectual. It kind of, you think about it long after you've heard it, and I find myself trying to work it out, like what she's trying to say.
I like how she doesn't waste any mental energy naming the movements of her works.
Well, they're all one movement works.
Just part 1, part 2, and so on. Yeah.
How did they do that on? Because I have a CD of this, and it's just 3 tracks for the 3 works.
Okay.
Yeah. So
how they're labeled
divided it up
on the digital versions, and then kind of split up as parts, numeral parts. So most of them run into each other, although there are breaks in some of them. But this is really hard to describe the arc of what's going on in these parts.
Yeah. I was starting to write down the episodes, and I said, I'm not going to do that. It's too complicated.
Incidents that happen, and you can create your own narrative with those, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, I think that's really what you have to do with instrumental music. You don't have any words to tell you what's happening. So you sort of know what the composer was intending, and then you kind of apply it to your own experience, and that's how you understand music, really. It's personal to every one of us, and it's probably different for all of us, too. Anyway, let me see here. Gubaidulina, I should mention, is currently in her 3rd and final year as the Gewandhaus's composer in residence. Now remember, she's 90 years old now. Okay, she combines, and this is what Andris Nelson says about her. She combines intellect, spirituality, and sensuality in her music. I agree. That's a pretty good description of it. Her music focuses on our relationship to God, and they are private dialogues with the divine, between her and the divine, and we are in there eavesdropping on these conversations. So maybe you can think about if you've ever read any of the writings of the saints, Julian of Norwich or something like that, and you feel like you're sort of eavesdropping in, except here it's happening in real time as the music goes by. So think about it like that. But when you think spiritual, in this case, you shouldn't think tranquil. This is not tranquil music at all. In fact, a lot of it's very, very loud and piercing. The dynamics on these recordings are absolutely spectacular, by the way, and you might want to warn your neighbors before you put it on, because it gets pretty loud and boomy at times with the crashing percussion, the bass drum hits. There's all kinds of other stuff too. It's not all loud. It gets very quiet as well. It's just extreme dynamics. Okay, you could say that all these 3 works are from her late period, although you never know, because she's 90 now, and Elliott Carter lived to be 103, and when he was in his early 90s, he kind of started in on this new style that he continued for 7 years. It's like a whole new period for him, so you can't really say. She tends to group her works together in larger complexes, each one developing out of another, and circling around the same theme and reworking common material. And she refers to this as cultivating and compares herself to a gardener. Okay, so she's kind of replanting certain plants in another part in another work or something like that. You could think of it like that. Now, this material that she's reworking, it isn't like a terribly memorable melody or anything like that, so you really have to focus and figure it out if you want to know. Okay, for this album, there are 3 works, and they all have to do with again, her relationship to the divine. The first one is called Dialog, I and You, and the second is The Wrath of God. Oh boy, you know what that's going to sound like. And the third one is called The Light of the End, and that's an earlier work from 2003. These other ones are from 2016, 2017 or so, or 2018, or even later, 2019. In the years 2016 to 2018, she composed an oratorio. An oratorio, think about Handel's Messiah. That's an oratorio. It's like a sung text that tells a story, usually. So it's like an opera that's sung and not staged. And this oratorio was called On Love and Hatred. Okay, it sounds like a philosophical treatise, just from the title. It was a musical appeal to humankind to follow God's commandments and to overcome hatred through the conciliatory power of love. Boy, we should just airdrop this oratorio into America. Something like that now. Sounds like they could use it. It sounds like a lot of the world could use it, actually, at this point. Okay, so 2 works on this recording were generated from the oratorio. The first 2, Dialog, I and You, which is a violin concerto, and the orchestral work, The Wrath of God, track 2. Track 3 is unrelated. It's earlier. All right. The first work, Dialog, I and You. This is her 3rd violin concerto, and it's written for Vadim Repin, who performs it here. I remember the second one she wrote. I can't remember. It had a Latin title. It was for Anne-Sophie Mutter, and it was really intriguing because it didn't have violins, the highest, except for the solo violin. It just eliminated the entire violin section. The violas were kind of taking the lead in the string section. It's really interesting. It was an interesting sound. That's not happening here, though. This is if you want to call it that, more straightforward. It's about 22 minutes long, and it's a single movement. So it's fairly short, I guess, for a violin concerto. The title, I and You, Dialogue I and You, recalls Martin Buber's book of the same name, and in fact, that's kind of where the idea comes from. The book describes the world as dichotomous, or divided into opposites. So if there's good, there has to be bad, that sort of thing. That's the way we see the world. But from the God's eye view, it's not like that, apparently. We are at least told that in spiritual works. I'm still working to see that. It hasn't happened yet. And when I get there, I'll let you know. Anyway, the complex dialogue between the solo violin and orchestra encapsulates the idea, the violin being I and the orchestra you. Okay, so the violin and orchestra are talking to each other. So sort of like in a Beethoven work, really, except they're struggling with each other there. Okay, I wrote all these notes. I can't really explain this. The orchestra, basically the violin is trying to convince the orchestra of something, and at times the two are in agreement, like the orchestra will pick up what the violin is playing and continue it and vice versa, but often they're opposed to each other. So, and this kind of goes on for the entire 22-minute work. It's a very listenable work, and it's often very pleasing to the ear in orchestration. And it's also, if you're kind of an intellectual type, it's pleasing to the mind in its clever interactions between the soloist and orchestra, and also in the orchestral harmonizations and timbres. There are a lot of really great sounds. The orchestra is huge in this, and she really uses a lot of the percussive, the metallic percussion timbres to a beautiful effect. Yeah, there's a genuine conversation for most of the work, and I found that very intriguing. Okay, the second work is The Wrath of God. This is for an orchestral, and it was composed at the same time as I and You, or Ich und Du. It expands the seventh movement of the oratorio on love and hatred. So if you somehow can hear that work, the material comes from the seventh movement. It turns this into an independent orchestral work. This is a shimmering depiction of the Day of Judgment, or the Dies Irae. Now, you can hear sort of, if you know the Dies Irae melody, Dies Irae, Dies Illa, you can hear fragments of that, but you never actually hear the theme stated. You often do, actually, in classical works, especially in the 19th century. It means day of wrath, that day. Okay. Okay. By the way, this work isn't finished. She's going to expand it into a two-movement work and it's dedicated to Beethoven, or in quotation marks, the great Beethoven. So there's going to be another movement added to it one day. Anyway, it starts with some spectacular low brass blares, and this really wowed me with its recorded sound. It really was very three-dimensional, real chest cavity stuff throughout this work. I think the Day of Judgment, in Christianity, it's a day of great worry and fear and things like that, but I think it's just going to sound fantastic according to if this work has anything to say about it.
You also get lots of gongs of doom in here.
Right,
too.
there are gongs of doom. And they hit the chest cavity in a very appealing way too, I have to say. Okay, the beginning brass merge into something mildly contrapuntal, which is always excellent when that happens in any piece of music as far as I'm concerned. And there's a lot of rising in the strings. It's almost like they're trying to climb out of a pit. You talked about the devil and keep the devil in the hole. It sounds like where the people are trying to get out of the devil's hole here or something. That's the kind of the image I had. But it's often interrupted by the brass. The brass seemed to be the doomy kind of part of this work. The funny thing is they're really appealing to listen to here. They're beautifully recorded. I guess they're sort of like the villain in an opera where he gets all the best tunes. I don't know. This is an extremely densely orchestrated work, and there are a lot of voices happening at the same time, but they're all clearly audible and followable in this, first of all, excellently clear recording, but the rehearsal that must have gone into this is really mind-blowing. I really wish I could have been there to hear it. I don't know how you conduct a work like this and get it so all the sections so clear. It sounds extremely virtuosic for every section of the orchestra. It's really something. By the way, there's a brief moment of sparkling metal percussion with winds and then strings playing a melody over it that I really loved, sort of in the middle or a little later than the middle. You'll notice it when it comes up. There's a second or two of silence, and this big first section ends. The brass play their ominous Dies Irae-like theme towards the end. Then we start hearing, I think, a repeat. This work might not be episodic. I think there's repeated material at the end because I recognized a lot of this from the beginning. And it ends with a sparkling percussion and brass. And this work is a real tour de force. I thought it was extremely compelling as a piece of music. It's ominous, but not bad. At the end, I guess we're all saved at the end, Russ.
I wrote, the Day of Judgment. God has vanquished his enemies. That's what I thought of, yeah.
But I'm guessing we're not the enemy, though, because it sounds like it ends positively to me, anyway.
Compared to the previous work, which I thought, even though you have this dialogue between the violin and the orchestration is rather minimalistic, I thought. I didn't think she added like extra layers of sound to the orchestration. So
you mean in this work?
No, in the previous work.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I thought she was. I don't know if it was a conscious decision, but I found it was easy to make out the different sections in the orchestral.
Right. It was also responses. A quieter work, I think, as well.
But here, there's huge kind of layers of things going on that are make it a lot more dense, and it's a big contrast to what's going on before, and lots of surprises. Just when you think something's happening, another gong or huge brass fanfare comes out at you. So pretty interesting. Yeah,
this was the virtuosity of the orchestra playing this was really astonishing. Not only are they playing really difficult parts, but the conductor is managing to balance them in a really virtuosic way as well. I thought this was just a fantastic performance. It really was sort of mind-boggling. I wonder if there'll ever be another recording as good as this, or even another recording. We'll have to see. All right. Well, I want to say more about that later, but let's get to the third and final work. The Light of the End. This piece is based on the irreconcilability. I hope I said that right.
There's a big one for you.
Yeah, there you go. I went to school. Actually, a lot of musicians don't really have such big vocabularies, so I don't know. 'Cause I think they speak in tones. Anyway, the irreconcilability between the natural overtones and of the natural overtone row, they said here, and tempered tuning. Oh, this is a highly intellectual topic. Now, one of the things we need to explain here is that the Western tuning system is designed so that there's an equal space between. Well, actually, they're not equal. They're slightly tampered with so that the octave, so that it'll come, the scale will come out, and the octave and the higher octave is kind of like a, how would you say, a multiple of the lower octave as far as frequencies go. So if you have a 440 hertz A, you'll have an 880 hertz A would be the next A. All right. I hope I did that right. But that doesn't happen if you space the notes out like mathematically the way nature they appear in nature. You don't wind up with an 880 hertz A if you start with a 440 hertz A. You wind up with something like an, I don't know, 885 hertz A or something. It's a little off. I don't know how much it is. I have this in a book somewhere, but I don't remember the number. See, if I was teaching this in a university, then I would know, because I'd be teaching it every year. Anyway, you can sort of, if you don't really know what we're talking about, you can sort of think of this as the days of the year. A circle has 360 degrees in it. And so that would mean that if a full year would have 360 days if it was a perfect circle, right? But no, there are 365 days in the year, and sometimes 366, so that everything gets adjusted. So nature it doesn't conform to mathematics, let's say. I don't know if I said that right. You can kind of use mathematics to figure out a lot of things in nature, but it does its own sort of thing. It has an order, but that order isn't like following like a mathematical like precision, let's say. Or I suppose it is, but it's following its own mathematical precision, not the one we want to impose on it. All right, so that's basically the situation here. You have the natural world, which is the brass in this work, and the rest of the orchestra, which is going to be the tempered tuning. To the composer, this work encapsulates the irreconcilability of nature and real life. And don't we know about this? This is really the entirety of human history. Is basically, this is one of the conundrums of human history. By the way, there's a fantastic piece by Charles Ives called "The Unanswered Question," which sort of addresses this issue in a different way. Give that a listen. Anyway, back to this. Nature, we usually neutralize nature, but she doesn't allow that to happen here. The title of this work, "The Light of the End," refers to the final section of the work, so I guess the end of the piece, in which the dazzling sonorities of the cymbals afford a ray of hope. But of course, it's hope only. We don't get I guess we learn how to live with within nature, but we don't conform to it. I don't think humanity is capable of conforming to nature. So this sort of idea and this work, in fact, kind of has a lot of, you can think of this as having a lot of commentary on the current environmental situation and the environmentalist movement. We can't ever be in complete harmony with nature just because of our nature. So we're always going to have to make certain trade-offs, although we're never going to dominate nature either. So some sort of balance has to be struck. Anyway, that's what I'm getting from this whole philosophical argument. The brass are playing in the natural tuning, and they sound particularly harsh against the sound of the rushing strings at the beginning. And I loved that harsh sound. It's very cool. I was like, whoa, when I heard this. Okay. If you're planning a relaxing evening, don't listen to this. It's not a relaxing piece. Okay. The strings actually sound warm when they're playing their chorale-like chords. Again, she's given the strings like material that's going to sound appealing. It's our human nature, I guess. The brass are always harsh in this piece. Now, they don't have to be in that natural tuning, but she's organized it so that it will be. And again, I enjoyed Gubaidulina's very large arsenal of orchestral sounds. There are a lot of chiming percussion sounds in this work too, just like in The Wrath of God. The orchestra is really put through their paces, and they sound great here. Again, kudos to Andris Nelsons, the conductor, whose work I've been admiring a lot lately, and especially here. This is a really amazing set of performances. There's some tremendous combined orchestral sounds in the last 4 minutes of this piece, and it sounds inconclusive, really, at the end. We do hear those gorgeous chimes that she talks about in her program notes, and the violin line tails off with a kind of dot, 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 to be continued quality, or is continuing on sort of quality. So, in conclusion, you want to say anything about this work, or do you want to just sum up at the end? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's massive orchestration here. I think there's marimba in here. I think there's like a big triangle part too. You know, triangle usually gets a couple of dinkles and twinkles, but there are lots of other bells, and there's like a bassoon gets some wandering. There's some interesting horn like cries in there, and lots of low brass. But the coolest brass part is like at the end. Well, in part 8, it must be, I guess it's tuba. It's sort of, I guess this reminds me of like Leviathan or something. It's like this like legendary beast. It's like, you know, just it's like waking from hibernation or something at the end, and then it's right before that kind of, you know, final ending that shows the light. It's sort of it's like the beast is snoring or something, and then then,
would the beast be the brass here, or like the nature's?
I don't know. Yeah, and then you get that harp too. In contrast,
this is what I mean by this piece. These pieces make you kind of think about them long afterwards. You're kind of trying to figure out a narrative to put on them.
So you have this like this beast, you know, low brass part, and then in contrast, you've got harp, and then the high strings, violin or viola there, and then you know, the xylophones and triangles like tinkling. You know, so you have this full spectrum of sound. So I thought, you know, the use of contrasting timbres and all these different sounds, in addition to the, you know, the different kind of tunings and things, make it a big a contrast. You know, it's not like a palette where, you know, if you relate it to colors, where you're picking out your living room and you've got, you know, I'm not really good with names of colors. You know, I know like 5 colors. That's about it. And then, you know.
So you don't know what like puce is?
No, or cornflower or any of that. I don't know any of that. But I
didn't even know that was a color.
It is. I thought you made
thank God we love music, huh?
I thought you made, you know, tacos from that, or burritos or something. But no, anyway, I can tell when you know, colors match, but I don't know what they're called, and so the tones that match. So here is like the opposite effect. You've got you're going for that contrast to get different effects, and so you're constantly getting this kind of you know, timbre shock amongst all the other things that are going on. So in that sense, it's really cool sort of display of the colors of the orchestra here. So yeah, it's interesting. It's hard to. That's how I had to appreciate it more than in a development of like a musical narrative. I know there's something like that going on, but in order to draw me into it, I was sort of focusing on the sounds I was hearing at any one point, and enjoying those contrasts and different combinations in the work. Yeah.
Now, we had talked about Eric Tanguy's music as difficult to follow, but this is different. There's a real... Tanguy's music had content. It's not empty music. It was very good, but this has like extreme depth to it. This woman's like a real philosopher, as far as like she's a sort of a philosopher composer, you could say, or maybe a priestess composer, maybe, since she's so interested in these spiritual elements. Now, if just to sum up for this, I want to really proselytize for her a bit, because I've been listening to her music when it came out it's sort of rare to get recordings of her music, but I remember the Kronos Quartet recorded her string quartet number 3, I believe it was, on one of their albums long ago when I was in college and I was just getting interested in this music. And I've been kind of had an ear out for her works ever since. It was a little too hard for me then, but it pulled me in somehow, and I kept listening to it. And it's the kind of music that you really have to live with for a while. It's not easy. You're not going to get it, but it's not off-putting by any means. Okay, it's hard, but it's not like ear-splitting or anything like that. It's exciting, I would say. If you're the kind of person that thinks classical music should be relaxing and beautiful, you should steer clear of this. But I would urge you to listen with an open mind, and if you're an intellectual type, you should definitely hear this. Try to absorb the exciting intellectual ideas that are being put forth in what I thought was an exciting musical way. Gubaidulina's work is very listenable, but intellectually and spiritually challenging. Though I don't find it exhausting at all. I find it really compelling. And like I said, I keep thinking about it after I've finished listening to it. It's very rewarding music if you stay with it. The intellectual ideas behind the works are all fresh. So it's not only this old, like, any old, like, sort of philosophy from Thomas Aquinas' time about Christianity. This is about the living God now. And the realization of these ideas in musical form is exciting as well. I'm trying to parse its message all the time, which is always difficult with instrumental music anyway. And I really want to read something about her music, actually. It might help give me a little vocabulary to talk about it with. But this woman, in my opinion, is an international treasure, and I would really like to hear a lot more of her works recorded. Now, I'm going to guess that that's not an easy thing to do because these sound really difficult to pull off. Maybe Andris Nelsons will start on a project to record a lot of her music. I wish people paid more attention to her music and programmed it more often, and I urge you to hear this work. And I am done for the classical music. There it is.
All right. Well,
all right.
We've got a interesting amusement park ride through the classical.
This
week.
Yeah.
It's not easy listening, but it's interesting listening.
Well, there you go. I think that's our theme. That's a kind of theme with this particular thing. Is we didn't plan this ahead of time. It just sort of happened that way.
It just turned out that way.
Yeah.
All right.
I love when that happens. Really, you have a theme that you're not even aware of when you start.
Yeah. So in the jazz this week, in the past few weeks, I've had so many recordings on my listening list that I was, kind of grouping them by instrumental categories. We had, trumpets one week, and we've done some saxes and things. And this week was going to be trombone week, except when I listened to all of the trombone recordings, two of the three I thought we're not quite up to the same standard, and I thought we might get boned out. And
I was kind of boned out by the trombone album you picked, but we'll get to it when we get there.
That to me is that's a great one.
I'm not surprised, but I'll have something to say about it too.
But anyway, what I had is also on the list is a lot of other things that I can't wait for there to be 3 recordings of a category like this. So this is sort of the odd assortment of instruments we don't hear enough of. So sort of the potpourri assorted instrumentation week. Starting out, I want to say though, I sort of think I prefer to, instead of like trying to plan a theme, which we do occasionally on this show, but I like to just kind of put just the 3 recordings together and just kind of try to find the hidden theme in there somewhere. What it might be, figure it out later. I really like that challenge. Yeah, it's another way to do it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that's what we're doing this week.
Yeah, this one we're going to start out with a violin. Once in a while we get some. We've done a previous jazz violin recording in an earlier episode, but not recently. And so here we have an album called Poetry on the ACT label, and this is the Polish violinist Adam Bałdych. I hope I'm saying that right. The Adam Bałdych Quintet. And Bałdych plays not only violin, but also Renaissance violin, which is kind of an interesting choice for jazz music. But the style of his jazz really lends itself to this interesting tone, which is a big part of his style here. And he's joined as a special guest on this album also by Paolo Fresu, I will always say Italian trumpeter. He's actually Sardinian. One of the two big names in Italian jazz world on trumpet and flugelhorn here. And rounding out his group, Marek Konarski on tenor sax, Krzysztof Dys, D-Y-S, I don't know, on piano, Mikhail Boransky on bass, and David Fortuna on drums. All the music is written and arranged, and the album was also produced by Bałdych, except the one tune, Hyper Ballad, which is actually a Björk song. So
I didn't know that. Oh, that's right. It is. Yeah. Hyper
Yeah.
Ballad. I know that tune. Okay.
And
I didn't realize it at the time.
yeah, I didn't know too, and I looked back and I said, okay. So this album is very interesting in his arrangements because of the way he blends instruments together. Also, his violin technique and the way he likes to build off from that. He's fond of plucking the instrument, almost not in a kind of a, as you would think of like a pizzicato violin line, but rather more as a guitar, building sort of a rhythmic motif to build on. And a lot of songs start out like that. And then the way, particularly, you can tell from playing with this regular group, the way that he blends the tone of the violin with the saxophone on unison things to sort of get this sort of, new expanded, wide tone, and it's hard to actually pick out the individual instrument timbres, and it like creates a new timbre. And here with Fresu as a guest, he blends in there and then adds another tone into this mix and mixes it up with a harmon mute too. So tonally, it's very interesting. And his overall approach is rather modal, I think. So a lot of the tunes, he chooses sort of harmonic ideas where he can explore a lot of modes in his soloing. Sometimes they turn rather kind of more Middle Eastern than, Western classical music, which is kind of interesting. And he seems to be involved as he came up as a classical player, but then got interested in improvising, and he has an ensemble, it appears, that is focused on having classical musicians improvise. You can check out some of his videos on YouTube. He seems to be getting some attention on that channel there. Anyway, on this recording, we start out with a tune called Heartbeats, and this follows that sort of structure that I described. It begins with a plucking sequence of chords on violin, and then it's joined by piano, and then the violin switches once the piano takes over that sort of rhythmic sort of basis. The violin switches to kind of weeping phrases, and you'll get a sense of his unique tone on that. The bass adds a kind of irregular line into there, and the drum is mainly like with light brushes, so you can hear still the melodic flow very easily. And then the sax joins with the violin, and you get that sort of new timbre that's created out of both of those. And Fresu makes his entrance here. On this tune, he's doing something sort of counter to what's going on with the violin and sax. He's got these counter improvisations that have a lot of fast valve fluttering and sort of skittles into the upper register. And then it's kind of over. It's kind of a short tune, jazz-wise, less than 4 minutes. It sort of sets the tone for a lot of the arrangements that we'll hear. Number 2 is I Remember. Again, plucking intro joined by the piano, sax and muted trumpet this time join in. This one gets kind of hypnotic and gets rather big beat, non-jazz beat, more of a pop-type beat going under it. Then Bałdych introduces a main melody with some long legato notes.
Yeah, I specifically said 70s pop for this one.
Yeah, it's like a pop
reminded me of the
kind
70s,
thing.
yeah.
Bałdych gets some very interesting timbres out of the strings in his solo here. And apparently, reading the notes of his background, he used to be a very much of a technical-based player, known for his technique, but he's sort of tried to switch to focusing more on a melodic style. And there's just some spots where he, shows some sort of real pyrotechnics. And in here, you'll get a hint at that with some blazing runs there, too. The tune is really quite pretty, and Fresu adds some nice tonal touches with the harmon mute. Track 3 is called Stars. This starts with some chiming low piano chords, and violin and bass play a unison yearning melody, which is interesting. The drums kick in, it gets some more motion. Baranski takes a bass solo, and then Dies has a kind of imaginative piano solo on this one. And Bałdych's solo has a kind of magical sort of a feeling to it, too. Maybe it's all in the stars, as they say. Track 4,
stars.
Theodore. Again, rhythmic plucking.
Yeah, he likes this a lot.
He does,
I started to notice this. He does it on almost all of the tracks.
Every tune,
a few of them he doesn't, yeah.
And so this one, obviously, he's using some overdubbing on this album because he gets this rhythmic plucking sort of motif going, and then he comes in with a bowed high note melody over it, and so he's doing multiple tracks with the parts. The piano and bass join in, and then Bałdych brings the melody down in the lower register, and he hits a really warm, thick tone. Fresu comes in, and he plays in unison. I had to listen to this twice. It's almost imperceptible how he joins in on the harmon mute. As I said, it's sort of like a joining of tones to create a new timbre. Fortuna adds light cymbal work and some tom fills. I think this is, the Renaissance violin. It has this unique tone, and it sounds really attractive. And he shows off here great phrasing in his solo rather than technique. The way he shapes his lines is very musical. And then after his solo, it's back to a more unison of the composed melody with the muted trumpet, and it closes with piano and some more subtle plucked figures that he likes so much. 5 Poetry, the title track, more plucked rhythmic opening to start this one.
I figured out at this point, I said that he does this to outline the rhythm. It's almost like he's setting the rhythm for the rest of the ensemble by doing that. And
right.
I think hearing it so many times, I say, that's what's happening. He's the first thing you hear always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here, Fresu is on flugelhorn with a melodic phrase, and then Bałdych in the lower register. They trade phrases, sometimes overlapping in a conversation, and then Bałdych adds another lower line to the mix. So his parts are obviously overdubbed, but the effect is nice, and the harmonic shifts are very simple in this tune, but they get to be kind of hypnotic. It's sort of like a wave going back and forth between the two harmonic ideas. 6 is a hyper ballad. This one doesn't start with plucking, rather a slow drum beat with a kick joined by the bass. Bałdych introduces the melody. It's joined by chiming chords on the piano. The sax joins in unison to thicken the sound of the melody, and then the violin and sax trade off phrases. The focus is on tonal beauty and phrasing. With track 7, we're back to the rhythmic plucking in unison with a legato sax, and it's also joined by the piano. The drums and bass come in to fill out the rhythmic movement that's already been established from his plucking. Like you say, he sets that rhythm up.
Right.
Bałdych begins his solo way up high, and then he comes down to the middle register. There's some really interesting chord changes here, and Bałdych explores them with these different types of scales. And here's another tune where he shows his technique with some flurries of notes. And I like the piano solo on this one, too. It's got a lot of intricate and precise rhythmic figures.
In fact, the piano solo on this album is consistently really warm and sort of pulls you in. You know, I liked his playing a lot.
Yeah. He seems to get that concept that he sets up with these rhythmic things, too. So he always makes sure he sets that sort of foundation before he departs from it, even in his solos. Track 8 is Psalmody. Psalm melody.
Like a psalm,
sure.
yeah. It's actually a church term, I think. I don't think it's it might be a combination of two words, but...
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's a slow repeating piano
I think it's the
notes.
adjective for psalm, really.
Is it? Psalmody? Yeah, it could be. Yeah. I never thought
actually, no, it's not an adjective. It's a noun. It's a noun.
Psalmody.
Okay, yeah.
Anyway, slow repeating piano notes and a drum beat lay down a basis for Bałdych to weave a melody on top of. Konarski joins in unison on the sax. Their tones match so well, creates this unified thick sound. The bass joins subtly into the mix too, and Konarski gets a solo here. He explores the harmonies going from the lower register up to high, and he plays a lot of fast rhythmic figures with a legato style. And then Bałdych solos get some fast bowing and also a real tonal edge of intensity on this tune, a little variation in timbre. Track 9 is called Birds, and this is another plucking figure. It's very hypnotic here. To start out, it's joined by bass and light drum work, and the piano joins in, and then Bałdych explores some of the interesting modes that are suggested by the harmony, and he plays a plucked solo that is more guitar or theorbo-like than it is anything on the violin. The harmony and beat change up for a bit in a section before the ending. So this was a kind of interesting composition, I thought. Track 10 is called Grace. Piano and violin introduce a rubato hymn-like melody. It's just a short piece that focuses on showing off the lovely tones. And final piece here is Open Sky. This one starts with repeating low rhythmic piano tones and bass with a drum beat that set a foundation for a searching melody that's bowed by Bałdych and then played in unison by Fresu with harmon muted trumpet and also in the piano right hand. So you have these multiple layers of sound playing in the melody. There's a transition section. It's got a lot of harmonic movement in descending lines. And Bałdych starts a solo in the low register. And here he explores some really kind of non-Western modes, and the effect gets to be kind of like a Middle Eastern type of sound in his choices. It's a nice groove that's laid down by Baranski and Fortuna. And then Fresu comes in for a harmon muted solo. He departs from the modal approach, which is more chromatic in his lines here. So I really enjoyed this album. I like his approach and concept. He's got some real cohesion in the ideas that he's putting together. The tonal blends with the sax and trumpet are very nice. I like his explorations in the harmony, using a lot of modal ideas that give sort of a multicultural kind of aspect to his improvisations. His playing is mostly centered around beautiful tone and phrasing, and he only occasionally, shows off bursts of technique and some edginess to his sound when it suits the moment. So yeah, check out his YouTube channel too. He's bringing together classical musicians and exploring different improvisations, and he has an interesting haircut too. So
I didn't check that out.
Yeah. But interesting album.
Yeah, interesting is a good word for it. Oh, but before we go on, I want to say psalmody is simply the singing of psalms. Psalms, of course, are are the words that you see in the Bible. So it is a real word then. And I've read it before. I know it because I've read so many books on classical music, right?
Right.
But the singing of psalms is psalmody. So if you're going to go to church and sing psalms, you're going to be engaging in psalmody. It comes from the Greek psalmoida or something like that. Singing to a harp is what it means. Anyway, this album, it's a kind of low key record. I thought the tone was really beautiful, and I especially enjoyed whenever the pianist came in. He had this really gorgeous, warm sense of chords and things like that. And I think this is a record that'll reward repeated listenings, like because of the interplay between, first of all, the violin and the sax, which I thought were fantastic. Is that Paolo Fresu, the sax?
No. Sax is...
Who's the sax?
Saxophone is Marek Konarski.
Yeah, I liked the way they kind of traded off.
Right.
I felt like the violin really worked well with what the sax gave him. You know, he would kind of go off and do something else. And again, the combining of tones into a new, that's sort of timbre, that's not really a classical thing to do. It has to be kind of planned in advance. I don't think you just do that. So I liked this. It didn't excite me, but it certainly interested me. So I was glad to hear it, and I just love hearing modes all the time too. So
yeah, it's more. How can I say? It's more hypnotic than it is energizing. It's sort of something that puts you in a zone rather than sort of excites you. So if you're in the mood for something, moody, that. As I said, moody, not in change of moods, but something that sort of sets an atmosphere.
Mood setting,
mood setting, and sort of puts you in a zone. Yeah, this would be a good one to put on after work. Pour your glass of wine, and it will put you.
I wouldn't put this on at the candlelight dinner, though. It's not really for that. It's
no. It's sort of contemplative. But. Yeah, I like this concept. I thought it's something unique, and it's not just a violin playing jazz. He has a clear approach to what kind of material he wants to put across.
He's carving out his own spot in there.
Right. All right. So another instrument we don't hear so much, although we heard it last week, but not like this, and we heard it a while ago. Not quite like this. Well, pick up those mallets for Puerta on the ECM label by Jorge Rossy. Now, this is Spanish musician's leader debut for ECM on vibraphone, which we often hear, and its wooden lighter cousin, the marimba, which we don't hear much of in jazz because of vibraphone.
Yeah, because it has to be recorded a little closer, too.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting is that Rossy is mainly been known as a drummer in the past with Brad Meldau Trio. And so, he is making a big switch here. And he says here, so Puerta means door. And so that has... significance here. He says, with this trio, the objective was to leave a lot of space for the instruments to breathe and unfold by playing fewer essential notes.
And he certainly did that.
You will get a real sense of space and looseness here. Rather than tightly grooving jazz, this is music that has a lot of gap and leeway. Not to say that it's I don't want to give the wrong impression that the players aren't melded and completely together. It's just it moves on a sort of more flexible kind of rhythmic paradigm, I guess you could say. Then he goes on to say, I tend to be a minimalist on vibraphone and marimba, to play a few notes and make more use of the space that separates the individual sounds from each other. I was a trumpet player for 10 years when I was still quite young. The lessons in melody I learned from that time also translate very well to the vibraphone or to the marimba. So apparently the Puerta, the door, was sort of a crossroads in his life when he was playing with Brad Meldau, and he was thinking about leaving the band, but he hadn't decided yet. And he finally saw that it was time to move on, and so he's sort of gone to a new chapter here. And vibraphone and marimba. And so here he's got all original compositions except for the tune Kargels, which is written by Chris Cheek. So we start out with a very interesting titled tune, Post-Catholic Waltz.
Yeah.
This is a slow 4-beat time tune. It's kept very loosely on cymbals as Rossy plays delicate minor descending chord textures on the vibes in the intro for over a minute. It's a very long intro. There's a kind of a pause, and then he starts out with finally the waltz beat that's joined by the bass and drums. I should mention his compatriots here. We've got Robert Lanferman on bass and Jeff Ballard on drums. So after the waltz beat's established, Ballard mixes up some subdivided beats, and Lanferman keeps the pulse, and Rossy hits very delicate chords. His playing is very delicate everywhere. Lanferman takes a solo, plays softly but with lots of movement, and Rossy takes the next solo. He turns up the volume a bit, varies up the rhythm of the phrases, which Ballard picks up on. He's a very sensitive and listening drummer. He adds accents over the loose feel. After a solo, it slows, and it goes back to the 4/4 restatement of the intro.
I should mention now, I guess, that when I heard this record, I heard it and I just kind of thought, this is okay. But it just kind of stayed in my head all day. And at night, when I was like laying in bed, I was just sort of thinking about the quietness of his playing, the just gently tapping on the bar with the mallet, and just having the sound just rise out of the instrument. It was so subtle and so like gentle. Yeah. It put me in mind. I was trying to think of what it was, and then I was laying in bed, and the image arose of those old like baby diaper commercials from the 1970s and 80s where you had
Huggies.
Huggies or something like that, where you had the guy, why it's a guy, I don't know, but he's got that bass voice that he's trying to simulate the softness of the Huggies or the diaper with his voice. He's saying like, Huggies diapers are gentle on baby's skin, that kind of thing. It's like, yeah. I tap the bar with my mallet, and the sound emerges like a puff of baby powder. That kind of thing.
Yeah, it's almost like he's afraid to hurt the hurt the instruments.
You're not going to hurt your baby's ears with this album.
No, it must be a personality thing. It's so restrained.
I don't mean that to be an insult, but it's just the image that came up for me. It was a good album. I mean, but
Yeah, it's interesting. And then, that's his approach to vibraphone. So when he switches over to marimba, you've got to even turn up the volume more, as he does on the second.
You got to put your head in the woofer.
Put your head under those sound tubes there. Track 2 is Tainos on marimba here. It starts with a loose shaker kind of beat. Rossy switches to marimba, and you got some real soft playing here. The bass joins in. Ballard switches to the drum kit from the shaker, still lightly with brushes. Gives some more motion as Rossy's ideas turns a little bit more melodic. It's as if he's playing as softly as possible. I wrote. Lanferman solos on bass for a bit, and then Rossy is back with some more melodic ideas before it fades out even more softly.
They talk about splitting the atom, as far as I feel like he's trying to put the atom back together again.
Yeah,
with how quiet he's playing.
Yeah, so quiet. 3, Adagio. Bass and vibes mix tones for a bit, and then Ballard adds cymbals. Lanferman carries the motion on this tune, and then Rossy chimes out on the vibes with some more attack finally. Ballard's drumming here is really all about texture rather than a beat. This tune is more about tones in a free space than getting any motion. And that's kind of the overall effect on a lot of the things here. There's so much space in the beat that's agreed upon, and so there's this hanging kind of looseness. It's kind of attractive in a way, but it's very the opposite of a hard driving kind of swing. The music hangs in space, and that's the way I think he can lay down his ideas without having to be in this sort of rhythmic lock, and that's what works for him. 4 is called Maybe Tuesday, and this is supposed to be based on The Man I Love Gershwin tune. You'll get a couple hints at it, but you might not know if you didn't hear me say that. The drum intro here starts it out. We get some more swinging with Lanferman walking and taking a bit of a solo before Rossy picks out melodic ideas little by little. And let me see. Then there's still a lot of space here. About midway through, he works up some more intensity with swinging lines for a climax. Lanferman and Ballard trade off phrases for an extended time before Rossy joins back in. And then Ballard keeps busy underneath with extra moving lines and jams out over Rossy's chords to the end. 5 is Cargill's. Here we get a vibe chord sequence that starts out before the bass and drums kick in with a slow waltz tempo for the Mitre melody. This one keeps a bit more of strict time feel, and Rossy plays some attractive melodies in his solo. Lanferman has a melodic solo too, as well, and there's a real dreamy chord ending to this one. Then we've got 6, Scylla e Charybdis.
Scylla e Charybdis, which I guess is Scylla and Charybdis.
Charybdis, the Greek monsters, right?
Yeah, from
in the Straits
the
of Messina, between Sicily and the Italian mainland.
Yeah.
So we've got a little mythical imagery here. Bass starts it out, and then Rossy and Ballard join in. The beat is kept precisely on the cymbals. Rossy starts out on vibes, but he switches to marimba in this to get different tones. So that's kind of interesting. He does that a couple times on the recording, changing instruments within one tune. Lanferman gets some space to solo here, and Rossy is back to vibes again for the melody at the end. 7 is the title track, Puerta. This is that Ballard gives a light intro with sticks. There's some this is very interesting, some whale-like crying effects. I wondered what is going on, and then I realized that it's Lanferman on bass, and he's adding like these overtones of bass strings into it, while Rossy works on an alternating pattern on marimba. And then he works some of these kind of whale cries into more bass tones, and you realize that's what it is. But it's a very kind of arresting sound effect. Rossy comes back in on the vibes with some more presence then until the ending. So look out for the whale cries on this one. 8 is ST. Mm-hmm. Letters S and T on marimba here. It's an interesting slow 4-beat rhythm for the melody. He gets a bit of a groove going on the syncopated melody and switches to vibes for the solo. The opposite he did on the other track. Rossy still plays with a lot of space, but he shows some more variety in dynamics and accents. And Lanferman has a rhythmic bass, more of a jammy solo on this one.
This one kind of reminded me. It has this kind of lumpiness to the rhythm. It kind of reminded me of Tom Waits. I kind of that. I like
that kind of like drunken plot of a beat in a Tom Waits song. Yeah.
Right.
9 Ventana. It's a faster tempo swinging tune. Rossy swings along and he keeps things very melodic and closes out appropriately with Adios. The last track, number 10. It's more of a rumba-like dance beat tune here with Rossy on marimba. And Ballard keeps the drums mainly on toms with a little bit of hi-hat here to say goodbye. So a unique very sometimes frustratingly subtle approach.
That's what I thought. That's a good word.
If you want to listen to this with its bizarro brother, it's really the antithesis of the style of Simone Moulier, yes. who we heard back in episode 29. If you want to hear like coked up vibes versus quaalude vibes, put these on back to back, and you'll get like a completely different approach to the instruments.
I kind of feel like if Simone Moulier ever found George Rossy's vibraphone and played it, that the vibraphone would leave Rossy for Moulier and enjoy being subdued more.
This is a sort of a masochistic marimba.
Yeah, he's afraid to touch the instrument, But no, yeah. I found that the way you described it is really exactly the way I felt. It was kind of. I found the quietness. The quietness of the sound almost sounded self-conscious to me, and it was frustrating to me. I mean, I'm fine with quiet, mellow sounds, but this almost felt like there was like a self-consciousness to it that kind of put me off. I don't know. I like the album enough. I mean, I said it's like I said, it's a good record, and if it appeals, I mean, you expect this sort of thing from ECM records anyway. They're always going to do something a little unusual. Yeah. Or they'll get an artist that'll do unusual things. But I was kind of like, I don't know. I think I'd rather hear Moulier. I remember saying that I was exhausted after hearing that record. After this one, I was frustrated, Yeah,
it sounds like, he gets like, 3 or 4 espressos before he plays, and then he goes in there and takes out his aggressions on it.
I think he comes onto the stage and he sees the vibraphone, and like kind of Don Quixote, he thinks it's a dragon, and then that's menacing the audience, and he has to heroically subdue it. But that's kind of what Moulier's playing sounds like.
To me, still, this approach
is not an insult. I enjoyed it a lot.
It's interesting to me. A lot of times people associate jazz with swing. And a real hard driving swing, and then ever since especially with swing and bebop and even more modern styles, the precision that's required to play fast lines over very fast rhythmic patterns, and then to take the opposite approach where the players agree upon this sort of kind of looseness in time, and you need to have a special drummer for that who sort of plays around the beats and doesn't accent in the places where you think it's going to happen. And then here Rossy's approach is to sort of play within those sort of spaces, and then he takes lots of spaces in general. That's his sort of approach. So it's a different concept of working with the time and rhythm of jazz, and in that way it's interesting. Sometimes it's a little frustrating as if you're used to listening to hard driving kind of swing things, but I enjoyed it, and something different, a player who won't sound like
it was unique, certainly.
That's right. And finally, for this week's Funhouse instruments.
The funnest house of all.
The funnest house of all. Particularly a nice title, Out of Focus. When you're looking in that Funhouse mirror, we do hear trombone from time to time, but never enough trombone. In earlier styles of jazz, it was more common. Once you got to bebop, it's hard to play bebop on trombone because you've got to work that slide in and out. Of course, there were some valve trombonists, but here we've got a real virtuoso. 2020 downbeat rising star of the trombone, Nick Finzer, on the Outside in Music label. Nick Finzer is a graduate of Eastman University, and for his undergraduate, and a master's at Juilliard, so does know what he's doing. And he's got some incredible trombone chops, and this is, to me, was a really fun album, if you like trombone. And here is another sort of Corona concept album, left with a lot of time on his hands. He wanted to see what he could do.
Whenever you say that, I always think, oh, what did he drink a lot of Corona beer and get inspired?
That's what I did. But here he's worked on. I don't have this album just came out. I think the 15th, so it's new, and I've tried to get everything I could for recording notes, but it just calls it virtual collaborations. So I'm guessing that much like the Chad Lefkowitz big band album we heard a couple weeks ago, that maybe a lot of this was done online through different collaborations. You're going to hear a lot of trombone here, a few guests, and on a couple of tracks he's just got with the quintet with a piano player who I had a nice conversation once with.
Oh, really? I liked his playing
Osaka.
a lot, actually.
Yeah, he's a really
the pianists
good...
all come up trumps on this.
Good
on all three of these albums. They're really good. They're really nice warm sounds.
I'm speaking of Xavier Davis, who I got to know when he was playing with Tom Harrell, but I got to meet him when he came to Osaka with Freddie Hubbard.
I remember that. I didn't go to that, but I mean, I remember you talking about that.
And it was with the New Composers Octet, who was playing behind him, which had a lot of great players. Steve Davis on trombone, one of the top guys today, was in the group that night. But what was really cool, it was like a Tuesday night, and embarrassingly, for the Blue Note is now gone in Osaka, but there were not that many people there. And, I was there with our friend Nathan and my wife, and the manager said, would you like to stay for the second show? And that's not going to happen very often. I said, oh, sure. And so all the other customers were, giving the bums a rush, and we got to stay, and the whole band went up to the bar. So I got to meet Freddie Hubbard and talk to everyone else. But I had a conversation with Xavier Davis, and he's a really nice guy too. So I haven't heard him on any recordings recently, so his name got my interest here. Also, Jay Anderson on bass, Quincy Davis on drums. I've got a few other guests joining in here. Finzer's particularly influenced by a lot of older styles of jazz too, and here he pays some tributes to Duke Ellington, but some other interesting choices, starting with number 1, Sing a Song of Song by Kenny Garrett, who we heard his latest album a couple weeks ago. And here he's got guest Reginald Chapman, and it just says he's a guest, I think, because he's a multi-instrumentalist. I think he may be on bass trombone on this track. This is a really cool track to start out. There's only trombones and drums. And the harmonization of the haunting melody is very cool, and some nice trombone solos here too. And it's kind of a haunting theme from Garrett's composition here. So this one sets the mood that you're going to get a lot of tromboning in here.
Yeah, and if you listen to this in headphones, there's some like Pink Floyd, like left to right stereo effects too. That was really fun.
Yep. 2, The Star-Crossed Lovers. This is from Duke Ellington's Such Sweet Thunder Suite, Suite, arranged for 5 trombones. This starts with some excellent plunger play, and then before it gets into the melody, there's this rising stacked trombone tone, sort of layers that come in. That's really cool. There's no rhythm section here, nothing, just harmonized trombones behind the plunger solo melody. It's a great lush arrangement, and actually there's 2 mutes involved here. It's something Finzer has worked on, and he gets real vocal-like qualities of sound effects. Right. It's using a pixie mute, which is like a very narrow, straight mute, and then a plunger over the top of that. So you get growls and all kinds of tonal variations there.
He sounded a lot like Charlie Brown's teacher for a lot. Oh, the adults in those Peanuts special.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. This piece,
Yeah.
I know you like the plunger effect, and I was really impressed by this guy's technique with this. He had a real speaking quality to it. But this track was like 6 minutes long, and it was just too much of that effect for me. I know brass players like you were gonna love it, but I was kind of like, it was like a funny. It started out as like a funny joke, and I felt like it was like one of those jokes that gets repeated, and then soon it's not funny anymore. I was kind of like, I don't know. I thought it was a bit long. Anyway. My non-brass playing, mind thought that. So there you go.
Track 3 is Stardust, the Hoagie Carmichael tune. And this one we've got the quartet format here. And just kind of played straight. And you get overall more picture of Finzer in a standard, jazz kind of format here, and
nice piano solo in this one too.
Very nice piano solo by Xavier Davis here, and just standard jazz done really well.
Yeah, Finzer sounds to me like he's very he's got a really great sense of humor.
Yeah,
and it even comes across in this piece too. He's funny, he's clever.
Yeah, it's not schmaltzy at all. It's. There's a good New York term for it, right?
Schmaltzy, yeah.
Schmaltzy,
the schmaltz. It's really, I think from Vienna. I think it's like a Yiddish word.
Yeah. Okay. And trombone can be, very yearning, on a ballad or something, but he doesn't get too emotional here. He has a sense of humor, like you say in his lines. Track 4 is a song that's kind of become a jazz standard, Laura, from the 1945 movie. I think the composer is Raskin here. This is just solo trombone. And wow, right away, your trombone comes in way up high. It gets way down low in the intro. And then Finzer outlines the melody. At the same time, he sort of hints at harmony with occasional low bass tone intervals. So, he'll...
Yeah, that kind of reminded me of something you'd hear in a classical piece, like something by Bach. You'd hear like the pedal point sort of, or like that tone, and...
Well, I think as brass players, you get a lot of these type of exercises and etudes in books that, like, and so you're forced to practice these things. And so they're sort of burned into your consciousness. So maybe, after all those interval exercises, you find some way to use them more musically. And so he incorporates those ideas. Then
at one point, go ahead. You want to talk about it? Go ahead.
Well, yeah, while he's in doing that in Malacca, then he unleashes this flurry of arpeggios here.
Right, too. That's exactly what I was going to say. It sounded like a Baroque keyboard work to me.
Yeah. And so he's like really showing all the technique that he's amassed while he's going through this piece. And then after that, he gets more back to the melody, and he kind of carries the tune swinging lightly to the end all on his own as he started.
As it gets to the end, though, like he's playing that low bass note, and he's kind of he's getting more of like an oinking, like a pig oinking sound out of it. Yeah. And I couldn't help but think, like, he doesn't like this woman Laura very much. Right? I didn't think, I felt like she was kind of like this unappealing, like, classic girl who was learning classical piano or something. That's kind of the image I got of her.
Could be. I've never seen the movie
here.
So I can't really say.
Yeah.
5, a tune that everyone probably knows, Mood Indigo. But you've never heard it like this, the Duke Ellington tune with a 15 trombone arrangement. Or 15 parts, I should say. I don't know how many of them he's playing, but I do know here he's got another guest, Jennifer Wharton, on the bass trombone. As you would imagine, it's a huge wall of trombone sounds.
It's the Phil Spector of trombones, basically.
Yeah. There are lots of harmonized moving parts. What I like is you get this huge thickness, but then under the trombone solo, there's parts that are just like chord hits on the beat. Womp, 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 and so that sort of breaks up the huge, thick legato sections. So that's kind of an interesting contrast. Then after the solo, all the bones get stacked on the melody, in a more cohesive thing before they kind of split on the arrangement a little bit more to the end. So, yeah, this is like more trombones than have ever been on any jazz piece, I'm sure. Yeah, it's a really interesting effect. 6 is a track by the trombone great J.J. Johnson called Judy. He's paying tribute to one of his sort of inspirational figures. This is another solo trombone number. Finzer again carries on a melody line while sometimes dipping low to outline the harmonic movement with lower intervals. There's not much room to rest or breathe in a piece like this when you're trying to do everything. So it's also a kind of endurance test. But he swings on melodically to the end, carrying it all as a soloist here.
Yeah. Thinking of Judy as a like character too. I think she sounds confident and sassy in this piece.
Yeah.
So I think between Judy and Laura, we can be absolutely sure of who he's going to invite to the prom.
Yeah.
I think he likes Judy a lot more.
Yeah. Then we had a really interesting choice.
This is my favorite track on the album, actually.
This is really uplifting. Bright Size Life, the Pat Metheny tune, which we heard just a few weeks ago on his live album. So here we're back to the quartet format. This is really, this tune, it's got an uplifting melody, and it actually sounds really cool on trombone. It's not what you would expect to hear it on, but Finzer shows off some technique on this one. A lot of rapid lines, tonguing effects too. Davis, another great piano solo here. He mixes these bright, uplifting lines that match sort of the scales implied by the melody, but in between he gets some kind of funkiness on the chords in between on his solo. So, I wouldn't expect to hear a Pat Metheny tune on trombone, but this works out really well, and it's a nice version. And then 8, Single Petal of a Rose. And this is another Duke Ellington piece from the Queen's Suite. And so he saved this one to the end because he's going to show off his chops. And don't try this at home, trombone players. But so another solo tune. Now here, you're going to get some real alternation with low tones and then, really low, with the yearning melodic phrases to start out. And then Finzer gives us a demonstration of harmonics on the trombone. So he's going to play these notes that get a buzz in the embouchure where you're actually going to hear overtones of other notes. So this combination is very cool. Then he climbs up really high for some notes near the end of his solo. Also gets some growling tones ended in there. And then he ends up with a series of these lower tones that include all the harmonics in them. So you actually you hear more than one note at the same time. These kind of things, if you play brass instruments, they happen sometimes when you're playing. They're very hard to control and use musically. So achieving this in a solo piece like this is kind of an awesome technical thing. So Finzer has really awesome chops, but he also keeps things musical all the time. He's not a show-off. And when he does do these things, it's always kind of like with a wink and a sense of humor, too.
He's definitely got a sense of humor.
Yeah. Great tone. Nice concept. Nice to see some, like just trombone as a leader, but then also, as a solo showcase, and then just saying, let's just bone this out with as much bone ideas as we can. Paying tribute to, his sort of, musical mentors, people who influenced. He had a real thing for Ellington's music, and of course, J.J. Johnson, master of trombone, but then throwing us a curve with kind of this Pat Metheny tune here, and the Kenny Garrett tune is a nice addition. So you got a mixture of styles, and then all deep trombone. So this is a must for trombone players or brass players.
Absolutely.
And anyone who just wants to hear something a little bit different and cool, and it's a lot of fun. I just really, if you throw this on, everyone's going to turn and look, because you don't get to hear this much trombone in any one recording.
It's an odd sounding album. I think it'll definitely turn heads if you put it on at the party or something like that.
Yeah. So there you have it. A mixture of jazz with instruments that we don't get to hear that much of, but here they all are in one fun house of jazz here. So, I think you'll have something a little bit different than the regular jazz quartet or piano trio to munch on for this week if you go through all this listening.
Yeah, this will definitely stretch your brain out like a piece of chewing gum.
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty stretched this week after getting the Wrath of God and some of those other pieces in here, and then getting boned by the trombones.
He's certainly keeping the bone and trombone on this album.
Yeah, we had some marimba and violin. A lot of variety this week.
All a little unusually played.
Yeah,
except for that opening Baroque album, which was pretty straightforward.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah,
it's great too because it's going to be very familiar. But I don't think most people know this composer and this tunes. So you're still finding music you haven't heard yet from the, previous centuries. We can go on like this forever, and
we will
never run out of things to listen to. That's right. That's right. So there you have it, folks. This has been episode 38 of Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. Do check out the playlist and hear all of these tunes on Deezer in one place. And take a moment, give us a review, give us a ranking on whatever service you're listening to us on. We'd appreciate it. Help us grow our audience. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can reach us at Adult Music Podcast, all one word, at gmail.com. Any hints for next week, Mike?
I'm going to keep it under wraps, I think.
Keep it under wraps. Okay.
Yeah, let me see. I think there might be another contemporary composer coming, though. And there's certainly another Baroque work, but this one's going to be a little off the beaten path.
That's right. Well, I can say, probably got another couple weeks of surprise things, and then we're going to get to, we're going to have to do our real face-to-face episode here in a couple weeks for Christmas episode.
The audience doesn't know this. We do this on Zoom, so we're not in the same room at the moment, but we sometimes do get together and do it in the same room.
Well, we see each other face-to-face at least once a week.
During the week,
we're going to do, we've done a couple episodes face-to-face, so we're going to have a little Christmas celebration, and we've got
a Christmas episode coming up, probably second week in December.
Then we'll have a best of the year Bizarro episode, which we'll talk more about.
Which I think we'll probably do after Christmas. Normally we do those before Christmas, but I don't know. I feel like I really want to do it at the end of the year.
Yeah, just in case something else pops up. So
you have something to listen to on New Year's if you're home alone like me. What is there to do here, man? You got to go to some temple and ring the bell. I don't want to do that.
Come over here and we'll have some food and drinks, and
that's possible. I have recently moved house, and I've got a nice shrine near me, so I'm curious to see what's going to go on there.
Get one of those big sake tarus and crack into that.
They've got one of those in the up in the main stage area of the shrine. So
something to do anyway.
I like the way that the Japanese kind of shrine religion involves alcohol. I think that's right. Really awesome.
Right from the morning on New Year's Day, crack that open and start the year right. That sounds good to me.
The Japanese nature spirits apparently like booze.
Yeah,
as we do.
Yeah. Well, that's enough booze and enough music for 1 week. Episode 38. We'll be back again next week with episode 39 and 6 new recordings. So until then, keep listening, and we'll see you for the next episode.